All right, welcome to the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I have my good friend Gary Chefetz here. Hope I pronounced that.
Good friends know how to pronounce friends' names, right? Close enough, Brayton. It's not an easy name.
How do you pronounce it?
Chef with an S, Chefetz.
Chefetz. Okay, got it. Well, anyway, Gary and I met working a transaction together. We were connected through a mutual friend, Josh Colbo, and we closed actually a sub-2 transaction out here in Felton, California, in Santa Cruz County, which was awesome. And I got to know Gary a little better, and I started learning a lot about transactions and creative structures from him, particularly with working in California, using the car forms and working with agents out here. But just to give you a little background on Gary, from what I know, he's a longtime member of the Sub-2 community. He's been investing in real estate over 40 years, I believe. I think you did your first creative transaction over 40 years ago. He's a leader. He's a real estate agent and broker. And he has experience in fix and flipping and wholesaling and just working with a lot of investors, which is one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. But yeah, Gary, I was really wanted to ask you, because we've worked together obviously on some transactions, but I wanted to hear your version of how you got into real estate and what sent you down this path, and when was that?
I bought my first house when I was 19, although I didn't close until I was 20. It was right before my birthday that I went under contract. And like you said, I did my first creative deal in the early 80s. And at the time, I didn't look at it as creative financing. I looked at it as desperation financing.
Getting it done by whatever means.
Desperation drives creativity like nothing else, I'll tell you that.
Was this your property or a property you were buying?
It was a 10-unit building that I moved my business into, and the building owner, landlord, would not provide a build out. Started a successful publishing business. I needed a place to home it. And this was a perfect space, although it was very raw. It had previously been a funeral home. So it wasn't exactly set up for a publishing company, and part of it I planned to live in. So they wouldn't finance a penny of the build out. They were happy to take the lease money, and I said, fine, I want an option to buy it for at the end of 2 years, at the end of the 2-year lease. And there was no way I was not going to buy this building after sinking 50 grand into it, someone else's property. And they just escalate the rent on me anyway, I'm sure.
Sure.
So 2 years into my business, early 20s, the bank was okay financing most of what I needed, but not all of what I needed. So I came up with the harebrained idea of converting the 10 units to condos. Now remember, this was the beginning of the 80s. Condos were rolling out across the landscape like sod, and it was the hot thing to do. And most of the condos out in the town I was in were being built in more of the outskirts, new construction. And I knew that there was a market for in-town stuff and conversions. And I figured, hey, there were 5 commercial units, 5 residential units, that I'd be able to sell 1 or 2 of the commercial units to the existing tenants to close that gap funding that I needed. The idea of finding a private money lender wasn't even on my radar screen. I just never thought like that. It's like, you got to figure this out yourself and make it happen. And so I hired an attorney to do the legal work for the conversion. I hired an engineer. This was way months before I'm going to exercise the option. And I'm working with the attorney, and he goes, you know what? I'll buy those residential units upstairs.
No way.
You can keep the commercial ones. And we came to a deal, and we went to the closing. And of course, it was an attorney closing. This is back east. He closed it. So I purchased the building, converted it, and sold off 5 of the units, all in one waterfall transaction. Yeah, and I bought additional multi-units after that. I liked rehabbing them and converting them. The exciting thing for me was I could be a little light on the financing if I could find my anchor tenant in the commercial space. I could close on a commercial unit on the first floor before I finished the condos upstairs.
Which would help you fund the rest.
Right, it would put cash flow into the development process. So that was one of my little winning formulas back then, and I did quite a few like this. So that's how I got started. I've also been in business for many years. I've done 5 startups, one plus one, a nonprofit. And that first business I started back in the 80s, it's still in business today. I haven't been a part of that in 3 decades, but it feels good to know that I created an institution.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's amazing. Yeah.
So you've done a lot, and it sounds like when you got into real estate investing, it worked for you pretty quickly on the first deal. Do you feel like that helped you build some momentum early on and some confidence?
When you're in your 20s, you think you're indestructible anyway. You don't know that you should be. I didn't know I should be scared of what I was doing.
Yeah,
It was like,
because there's some moving parts there. Finding someone to take the first unit while you're developing the others. What if you couldn't find that buyer? There's obviously things that could happen.
I know, when I look back at it, I'm like,
That's some pretty advanced stuff there.
all I can say is I boldly went forward with this stuff with, I'm going to make it somehow. So I did.
That's awesome. And so where'd you head next after that? So you were doing some development stuff for a bit, and then when did you get licensed and move in that direction?
Oh, I didn't get licensed until recently.
Okay.
This was supposed to be my retirement career. I spent a lot of time in technical pursuits. I was an early adopter of computers. I'm talking before Apple, before Microsoft. I know I only look 20, but
So the startups were mostly tech businesses, or a couple of them were?
what happened was in my publishing business, I got very clever. The typesetting gear back in those days, the stuff that you needed to go galleys for your text and layout and all of that, that was all manual processes before WYSIWYG, it's before What Is What You Get, it's before desktop publishing hit. I had $6,000 computers that from Digital Equipment Corporation, and I had this massive CompuGraphics system that cost a lot of freaking money. Was pretty much a dumb terminal. It didn't do much. The $25,000 seat unit rig was not as sophisticated as the $6,000 computers, and I said to myself, there's got to be a way to get these two talking to each other. And I was more of a seasonal business when I first started, so I spent that time learning computers, teaching myself, and I figured out how to get them to talk to each other. And my very expensive CompuGraphics system, a competitor would have spent $150,000 to do what I did for $30,000, $40,000. And that became an output station. All my input was managed on these smaller computers. They were all networked. And people would come into my office to pay their advertising bill. They'd see all the computers and they'd go, hey, I need a computer. And this is the early 80s. People were just awakening to these things. Can you help me? And I'm like, can you pay me? And the ones that said yes, I started helping. So I did a lot of back office implementations for small businesses, everything from restaurants, marinas, grocery stores, all kinds of businesses, you name it. I worked in them. And as time went by, I realized that small business was great, but they struggled to pay me $50 an hour. And if I were working for Fortune 2000 companies, they'd have no problem paying me $10,000 or more a week.
Sure.
Yeah, I was it's funny because of the markup language we used to produce typesetting was a precursor to HTML. It was actually born from that same soup and emerged from that same primordial soup. Wow. And so HTML was, that's easy for me. I adapted to that very quickly because I was already using markup language, very similar markup language, to produce the typesetting. So I started doing websites and eventually picked up some large clients in the e-com business, and I just evolved in that tech career for many years, becoming more and more valuable as I went. So
So when did you,
this is a boring non-real estate story now. That didn't stop me from doing real estate projects here and there.
that's what I was wondering, were you doing real estate on the side?
Yeah, I love real estate. It's always been a passion.
Yeah,
But I love the tech stuff as well.
sure. Did you ever visualize real estate as being the main thing, the only thing?
Yeah, but it never seemed to be practical for me until, that's why I say, that's why I got the license, because I wanted to full-time real estate. I've been doing flips, and
Sure.
I was doing flips 2020, 2019, 2020, early 2021. Then the market went crazy and it became really difficult to justify buying some of these properties for flipping. And I had originally said, I'm going to get my license because I need to be able to just open doors for myself. I need to be self-propelled. And I was buying on market mainly. But then I realized as a member of PACE's community that I could help other people with their transactions and with their deals, structuring deals.
Love it. So today, what's the percentage of deals you're working with other investors versus your own listings or other projects you got going on?
Real estate projects like rehabs, I'm trying to buy one right now. Again, the market's been difficult. So many people got into the business, and I find that unless I can make a certain percentage profit on these, that it's just not worth my time.
Yeah.
I don't want to work super cheap. And right now, with the competition being what it is, people are working for less money than I'm willing to work for. We still have an issue in the marketplace right now where people want too much money for their properties. And the market has gone really soft out here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're in California, and we see that more than anywhere probably is just the price.
In the second house, third home market, a vacation home market, and that goes down before the first home markets do. So I've been seeing a decline here, and I'm in the Palm Springs area. Palm Springs is reeling at the moment with single-family homes. Their single-family home outlook right now is terrible, and it's because this city's going through a reset from mismanaging short-term rentals.
Yeah.
They allowed an incredible amount of speculation, and what's happened is then they turned around and tightened the regulations, and now you have a lot of people who want to dump these properties. They want to get out. It's no longer as profitable, and as a result, the property values are falling, but some people are not reconciling themselves to the fact that, hey, you bought at the top of the market, you paid a premium price because you were going to STR the property, and now you want to sell it, and you got to accept the fact that you're going to lose a couple $100,000 by the time you're done. And it's a hard pill for people to swallow.
It is. I've done some acquisitions out there with some short-term rental owners, and yeah, multiple liens and just not in a good position, even with the most creative structures. And didn't they outlaw or ban short-term rentals on a lot of those single-family properties?
Well, Palm Springs still allows it, but they did put some restrictions in. They put some restrictions in place that reduces the potential revenue. But what they've done is they've capped neighborhoods at 20%. Now, 20% of the homes in a neighborhood, that still seems pretty high. But there are some neighborhoods where more than 40% of the homes were STRs. And you think to yourself, 40%? That's not a neighborhood. That's a hotel with roads instead of hotels, or hallways, right?
Yeah.
It's a hotel. It's unfortunately, they're taking on a lot of pain. Now, a lot of other communities had banned them entirely before that speculation level happened, like Rancho Mirage is super conservative where I live. It's more of a bedroom community.
Got it.
Rancho Mirage just recently, within a couple of years, the last couple of years, got an In-N-Out burger, which is the very first fast food restaurant that they've ever allowed into the town. So that's how conservative this town.
Yeah. Funny, we were looking at Palm Springs a bit because we were really wanting to get into the boutique motel scene, kind of transition from short-term rentals into boutique motels. And it's funny because we tapped into it before I heard anyone talking about it. My wife and I, we said, hey, here's the next thing. And sure enough, all of a sudden, multiple influencer types were talking about it, starting to buy them. And now it's obviously blown up. And I do think it's a good opportunity. And particularly, I was looking at Palm Springs. I saw the opportunity with the regulations on short-term rentals. I saw the opportunity for the boutique motels to do well. My only concern, and I had a few of them, was seasonality. And there was a lot of them on the market, a lot of older ones on the market, pretty distressed. And we ended up not obviously picking that as a market we wanted to invest in. But what are your thoughts on that down there? Seems like there's a lot of old boutique motels.
So for in case somebody's listening, they don't understand what boutique motel means. Let's put a frame around that. Sure. Boutique motel, for those of you listening who don't know what this is a motel run like an SDR, like an Airbnb. In other words, not daily maid service. No, what's that?
Not a big branded, like a Hilton, not a Hilton.
It's the operational aspect of it where you're not doing daily housekeeping. You're not providing services that normally a motel would provide. And so it's service light model. And that's what makes them functional and work, because I got to tell you, I've been in the actual resort business. One of the reasons why I moved out here was a friend of mine. I said I was doing projects. Sometimes some of the real estate projects I was doing were other people's projects. So I actually did a full remodel on a 35-unit motel, a food and beverage operation. The money was not in the rooms, although there was decent money there. The real money was in the food and beverage operation. And I can tell you that even with 35 rooms, it's a marginal business unless you have the food and beverage. And the hard part about running a full service operation is at a smaller scale is the staffing. So housekeeping, if you only have 2 housekeepers and one of them's not able to come to work, guess what? Guess who's cleaning toilets and changing sheets? Either that or you have to overemploy to be able to guarantee that you're going to have coverage. I look at that business and I say, I wouldn't mind doing it, but I want at least 100 rooms with food and beverage.
I hear you. And I don't know if you've heard of Blake Daly. He's become pretty well known for he started in Florida with short-term rentals. I've been following him on YouTube. But anyway, he started with short-term rentals, went into smaller boutique kind of roadside type motels, and his latest one is over 100 doors. And so that shows you right there where he's heading, and that one's in the Smoky Mountains. It's a resort style, and he's brought in 4 or 5 partners who all play different roles. But yeah, like you said, we've underwrote a bunch of them, and it's the door count's important. I think the location is so important. I think for us, it needs to be a unicorn property. It needs to be special for it to really work.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true of SDRs too? So if you're talking boutique motel, it should be special. It should have some special going on.
You should have a unicorn property if you want something that is sustainable over multiple decades, because I just think you don't want to follow the trend. You want something that's like on the water, by the beach.
Or it's in Joshua Tree and it's got a special landscape, I spent a lot of time looking at what worked and what didn't work in that space. As soon as the influencers, the LA crowd got into Joshua Tree, all these people, all of a sudden, everybody had to have an SDR in Joshua Tree. And of course, they overdid it, but
they over-innovated.
People were choosing any location in Joshua Tree. They were going out onto the mesa. The people didn't want to be in the mesa. They wanted to be up in the mountains. They wanted that instant experiential thing, and that's what we're really getting at, right?
Yeah, in that market, the people trying to sell can't give them away. I literally have had sellers where we structured deals where they're paying us every month for us to buy their property subject to, and even those didn't pencil. So it's rough out there. People went out and over-designed, over-renovated. There's a lot of really cool, unique stays, beautiful to do a property like that, but not really the best investment or sustainable over the long haul. That market's been hit super hard.
You know, they did the same thing happen up in 29 Palms. Everything adjacent to Joshua Tree, it just went crazy. And it's funny, the ones that really scored the best were sometimes just cabins or slightly larger than a cabin in a very rustic area, some of them even off the grid. And that was the experience that people were wanting. Or they were these larger homes, multiple bedrooms with views or special features, like you said, on a body of water. In this case, there's not a lot of water up there to be beyond, but there are mountaintops and places like that where you wake up to these breathtaking views, and that's what sells and that's what people want.
Yeah, and the people that bought them right and did it right are probably still doing pretty well. I think there's a lot of people who got in late at the peak and who are trying to sell and can't. And for a lot of people I know who invest out there that I've heard, because I don't invest out there, just they're not performing like they used to. But it is what it is. It's been like that kind of across the country. The short-term rental game's definitely changed. It's become more of an amenity game. Saunas, hot tubs, all kinds of little extra amenities to stop the scroll, get people to book your place over other ones, which I personally don't love that. I don't really want to have a pickleball court and a tennis court, and it's too much to maintain. You have to have more staff, more maintenance. I personally don't love it. I don't really want to paint my house pink in order to compete. Like I want something that's sustainable over the long haul. That's what we got into real estate investing for, was to build wealth for us later. We're not necessarily trying to be in this highly active hospitality business.
That's just it. It's a business. That's not a real estate investment. That's a business investment. And people need to understand that there's a difference.
Absolutely. My advice to anyone looking to get into short-term rentals would just be to don't rush, really study the markets and buy them right, and really think about what your end goal is before jumping in. Because, you know, the ones that are highly designed, highly renovated with tons of amenities, I would strongly encourage every 10 years to factor in a redesign renovation budget, because trends come and go. All of a sudden your property's not booking because it's yellow or has glitter everywhere. That's something you should be thinking about.
Glitter palaces went out in the 80s, I think.
I think they're back temporarily. I don't know.
I am so not with trend. I need to hang out with younger people like you so I can hear about what's trending now, eh, Sonny? Tell me.
The other thing I see is people over renovating. They're pulling a HELOC and basically spending hundreds of thousands on a single family home to renovate them and turning into these experiential short-term rentals, which that's awesome. Like, it's a cool project. They're beautiful, but how sustainable is that? What's your actual return? Because single family homes aren't valued the same as commercial properties. So when revenue increases, the property value doesn't increase. That's the big problem I see with it. If you're going to do that, do a motel, an RV park, something where you can actually drive appreciation.
Now, I know RV parks are trending right now for sure. So I know a lot of people looking at those and getting into them as alternative for tiny homes and treating it more like a resort. But that's not something new. I live very close to the RV resort with a golf course, clubhouse, multiple pools. It is a large resort property, and it's practically right around the corner from where I live. And it's been here for years, and it's extremely popular, and that model works. But again, it's a business. You got to have staff.
RV parks especially.
The more attraction you provide, the more staff you need.
There's a lot of things that need to be done on a day-to-day basis with RV parks, even more than a boutique motel. So you definitely factor that in when purchasing amount of pads, location, all that stuff, because it's going to cost a lot to run those. Unless you want to be there yourself running them and run around like a jackrabbit.
You still need people to maintain the grounds. There's a lot of servicing that has to be done. They're not real estate plays, they are businesses. And you have to look at it that way. And if you're not looking at it that way, then you need a vision adjustment.
We've offered on probably 12 boutique motels. We're in contract on a couple, didn't get them closed. I think the universe didn't allow it to happen for us. We've offered on a few RV parks recently, and one that we almost got but didn't close. But we just chalk it up to, hey, it wasn't the right timing, wasn't meant to be. We're okay with when deals don't happen.
I've had my eye on a property that I think would make a really good RV park, themed RV park. Maybe you and I should talk afterwards. Look at this.
Yeah, I think it's a great asset class and a fun type of property to own. I love RVing. I've been RVing for almost 2 decades now, and yeah, we love that. Anyone who's RVing is having a good time. They're on slow-mo, they're camping, they're cruising, and so I like the people, and it's a nice mellow vibe usually at RV parks. So I like that about it.
There's owning and then there's operating.
Owning would be better. So what kind of stuff you got cooking now? Do you have a lot of creative finance transactions? You're working with other investors currently?
I'm always working on creative financing, absolutely, and trying to figure out ways how to make deals work without creativity outside of just the simple deal structure.
How many files do you do a month? I know you TC and help people as well with creative finance deals. How many of those do you typically get a month through the community?
Closing on average 3 or 4 a month.
And then you have listings also you're showing, and
sometimes I have listings, sometimes, but I'm more on the buy side, and 60% of the deals I do are not on market. They're off market.
So let me ask you this question. So being licensed yourself in California, what would your advice be, or what's been your experience working with investors like myself who are doing wholesaling, cash creative, all the different things? Would you recommend other agents connect with people like myself to multiply potential transactions they can close within a year and just create other options for their clients?
Most of my clients are wholesaling, and how do I put this nicely? There are a lot of people out there that are just, most of the wholesaling community is out there breaking the law all the time. And somebody just yesterday, they were trying to get me on their buyer's list because I will buy a property from a wholesaler. I have no problem directly. And sometimes I do dispositions for. You work with enough people, somebody's working a deal and they don't have a buyer for it. I'm like, hey, I think I got you a buyer for this because I've worked with so many people. I know people who are out buying what they want. Oh, this looks like a George deal or a Sarah deal. And so I can do that. But, what I see going on, like California, you're allowed to do 7 contract assignments without a license. And I know there are people doing much in the 12-month period. So after that, you need a license to wholesale. So the biggest wholesalers, the most legit wholesalers that are operating in California are brokerages. The smaller ones, even though they're doing a much higher volume than 7, they're not adhering to the law. Now, it would be smarter for them to just run those pay a little extra, run them through a brokerage so they don't have to worry about it. They'll be fully compliant with real estate transfer statutes, the civil code. There'd be less risk of downstream lawsuits. Yet people they want to save such a small amount of money and take on that risk. It doesn't make sense to me.
And like you told me before, if they worked with you on it and you represented them, then in that case that they can do as many as they want. They're covered. Yeah. So depending on the type of transaction, it depends on who you work with, but
people call it TC, but I don't. I'm brokering people's transactions for them and doing it with industrial strength E&O coverage and QA team that works behind me in the brokerage. The brokerage I work for, Fathom, is NASDAQ traded, has 15,000 agents across the country, which is great because I'm able, whether it's Northern California or in some other state, I'm able to loop in other agents to help my clients close deals and get them listed, put on the market. I'm able to take advantage of that vast platform. To begin to build that myself, duplicate the infrastructure that the company has, it would be an outrageous task to try to even think about. So
Built-in network.
it's built-in infrastructure, built-in quality assurance, built-in management, built-in legal, built-in compliance. It's a lot of technology the company has to offer. So I couldn't duplicate that as a small little brokerage. But even if I wanted to, I wouldn't. I would stick with the larger company. It gives me a lot more flexibility.
So if you're out there wholesaling in California and you're doing more than 7 transactions, give Gary a call. He can help you.
You should do it even if you're doing fewer than 7. But
Absolutely.
like I worked with recently, I had helped a wholesaler close a deal with a flipper in LA, and I like this guy. He and we just hit it off during that transaction, and we continued to talk. And I'm like, Joe, why aren't you using me to manage your deals? My wife's got a license. My daughter's got a license. I got a license. I said, yeah, but none of you know how to do these deals. You guys are flippers. What are you talking about? And so I finally got me to do one with him. And I put one little requirement in the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement, that the seller was responsible for wood pest inspection and clearance. And that led to a $7,000 credit at the end of the sale. And so I said, now, Joe, look, I just paid for 5 transactions, right?
Oh, yeah. And on that subject, Gary, you've saved me and helped me manage quite a few weird situations. I think one escrow company said we couldn't assign. You quickly corrected them. And there's been multiple other situations that you've helped make sure we are protected and doing the paperwork and everything properly.
That's another thing. Yeah, a lot of people rely, oh, the escrow company knows what they're doing. Sometimes they don't. And if you don't know what you're doing, then how the hell do you know whether because how can you judge? You just assume the paperwork they're generating. I recently ran across an escrow agent who was doing naked subtos, like a little naked subto factory. What do I mean by that? Not securing the seller's position. And that's only going to lead to problems down the road. And I got on her case. I said, and I'm not going to say her actual name here, but I'll make up names. Betty.
I'll ask you later.
Don't do this, Betty. It's just, you're exposing yourself to liability down the road. It just doesn't make sense. This is what the clients want. Just because the client wants it doesn't mean you should do it. What about don't you have your own assets to protect? Do you want to expose yourself that way? And it just amazes me how laissez-faire people can be. Very meaningful risk.
This is something we discussed before that I also learned from you was mirror wrapping the subtos so they can then be recorded as a note and serviced. Do you want to elaborate on that more for anyone listening who's not familiar with what you're saying there?
Yeah, so when I said naked subto, what I was literally talking about is not securing the seller by wrapping the subto note, the loan. So what you want to do is create a mirror wrap and a promissory note. So what does the mirror wrap mean? We're not trying to play arbitrage with the interest rate. We're simply doing an all-inclusive deed of trust, or if you're in a mortgage state, it would be called a wraparound mortgage. These are the general terms for these. Some people use other terms, and that allows the original seller to step in and foreclose before the bank does, and allows them to say, because remember, their future credit is on the line.
Absolutely.
So it's important that especially when you're a licensed person, you're motivated to protect everybody in the transaction. That's why I don't love the whole wrapping other people's notes business, because I don't really see that as creative finance, because you're not necessarily acquiring property. You're just playing arbitrage on a note. And it's okay, I think, for people to do it if they have good cash reserves. Because if it's worth doing, then it's worth covering the risk of it.
Yeah. The person wrapping.
Yeah, wrapping not for the sake of acquiring the property, but for the sake of playing arbitrage on the note. When you do that, I think you need to have significant, first of all, you may not find your app buyer right away, and some people don't have enough money in their pockets to cover it for 3, 4, 5 months on market. What if you buy it in a hot market and a month later, oops, we're in a recession, things are not so good, what are you going to do? Unless you have good, reasonable capital reserves, like a bank or any lending institution is required to have by law. But when somebody does this as an individual, there's no rules. Although if they're doing it more than 3 times, Dodd-Frank has a 3-property exclusion, chances are they're breaking the law anyway.
Three wraps on the same property?
No, I'm talking about you're allowed to do 3 mortgages, seller financing mortgages a year. After that,
Personally?
yeah, as seller doing so. There's a 3-property exemption in Dodd-Frank.
Interesting.
Yeah, people don't know this stuff.
That's nationwide?
Yeah, that's a federal law that came out of the housing crisis.
So if you had 10 property, like a portfolio, and you wanted to sell them all in seller financing, you could only sell 3 technically that year?
Per year. Otherwise, you can sell them all as long as you now you need an MLO, you just need to do it the right way. But casual seller financing, you are restricted. And they can't have balloons, and they can't have, so what? I'm not allowed to have a balloon? No, read the law. Now, the biggest risk when you're wrapping just in the note business is that the buyer stops paying. So if you don't have skin in the game, do you just let the original note holder get screwed? Should that be okay? I don't think so. Take responsibility. This is a risk you created. Be responsible for your own freaking risk.
And if it's like a short-term rental that you then wrapped to a buyer, I mean, if you no longer have control over the asset, the booking accounts, all the stuff, that could be quite a bit of risk if they stop making payments, but you can't control the property and generate revenue because they're in charge. That's going to be a messy multiple months of trying to regain control, and it's going to be expensive and extremely stressful.
That's what I'm saying. If you're going to be in that business, make sure you've got the cash reserves to cover the level of risk that you're assuming.
But yeah, you guys work with Gary or work with someone who knows what they're doing. This is why I work with Gary on a bunch of deals, and there's just stuff you don't know if you don't know.
I make it my business to know.
Anything new and exciting you're working on or plans for the future? I know it's your retirement career, but how's it going? Any plans, anything cool?
I'm working on a book.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm writing a book, a how-to manual for real estate professionals, because I'm tired of having to jump on all these phone calls trying to explain how creative financing works to other agents and escrow companies. And so I feel they deserve a reference manual that can help them through this process.
Awesome. I love it. If anyone's wanting to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Email. You can ping me on Facebook or Instagram, Gary_. Are you going to pop it into the...
Yeah, I'll be sure. We'll pop all the links in the YouTube video. You guys, you can get in touch with Gary and reach out, work with him. He's amazing. We'll make sure we got all the links in there, and I'll be sure to add the book link once he puts that out as well.
I'm hoping that I'll have that done, ready for press sometime before we hit the half-year mark, but we'll see.
Awesome. I'll make sure it's in there, you guys. Thanks for joining us today. If you got any value, please subscribe, give Gary a follow, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you so much, Gary, for your time.
Thanks for having the conversation with me, Brayton. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome, Gary. Talk soon. Thanks.